Tell Nadya.
Maybe don't know. Maybe don't.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Kris Hampton.
And I'm Nadya Suntay.
And this is our first board meeting together. So let's tell everybody about you a little bit. You've been working with us for, I'm terrible with time, but a couple of years at least, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ever since, I'm pretty much like since COVID started. So yeah, it's been a couple of years. I think this might be going on 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And you sort of run our proven plan group chats, and you're always in there giving folks advice, and you also coach some of the proven plan clients as well as some custom clients.
Yep, that's correct. Yep, I started mostly with the proven plans, but I do a little bit and with custom as well.
In a future episode, you and I should talk about some of the things you think people can do to get the most out of their proven plans, whether it's a proven plan with or without coaching.
Yep.
I think that could be really interesting for people to listen to.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that would be great, because I do get even some of the people that start out with me, like, with people that I'm coaching, they'll ask me, hey, like, what can I provide for you that will help me?
Right.
Like, what are the things that you want me to tell you? So I think that's really important for people to understand. And really, the more information they can give us, the better we can help them through their projects or through their training.
Yeah, I think coaching is super valuable. We're going to be talking today about some of the reasons why, but I think, talking tactics, approaching the things you want to climb on, just having somebody to talk to about, I'm feeling nervous about getting on this hard thing, or do you think I should try it 2 days in a row, or things like that. I think that's where it becomes really, really valuable for folks.
And I think too, accountability, right? If they know there's somebody who is, asking them, how's your training going? Are you getting outside? How are your projects? I think then folks are more inclined to keep training because they have somebody that's kind of like looking out for them in a sense, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And so today's topic, we're gonna talk a little about why simplicity is the better option over these like super complex training methods that seem to pop up every now and then, and maybe they seem like they pop up more and more because of social media. But I think in reality, they're probably going at about the same pace as they always have. We just see them. They're in front of our faces a lot more often. And it can be really distracting, like to see this shiny new thing that you want to add to your training, And as coaches, I think it's important to remind people that there's a really good reason for simplicity. And I thought you would be the perfect person to talk to about this, since you are dealing a lot with the proven plans, and that's sort of the platform they're built on.
Totally. Yeah.
So we've got our top 5 here. We're going to go sort of in order of, down to the most important. But in reality, like all these board meetings, if one hits you more than the other, then it's probably the most important one for you. So Don't take this order too seriously. Number 5 reason, you should be planning to do this long term. So if it's super complex, if it's really complicated, doing it in the long term isn't a super sustainable way to go. Simple's going to be better when you're regularly having to create new plans, to stretch this out, infinitely for as long as you're training for climbing, it's going to be harder if it's more complicated.
No, totally. I think that especially we have a lot of things going on in our lives in general. So you don't want to make a plan and then make it so complicated that you can't follow through. So really the best thing to do is just make something very basic, very simple, something that you know that you will stick to that makes sense. And then just follow through. And then as you go along, you can add things,
Hmm.
as you progress and get better at creating a plan for yourself, then you can add things. But really, I think it's important to just get the basics down first, and then maybe at some point add and make it a little more complicated. But it's just easier to follow if you just have something very simple, something you understand, and stick with it really, and be consistent with it.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure you've heard this from folks and you may have been there yourself. I know I have. You sit down to write a training plan for yourself, and all of a sudden, there are like 5,000 things you're thinking about. And do I need to do this? And do I need to do
Mhm.
this? And I have to add in this thing I saw on Instagram the other day. And
Yeah.
this thing looked like it is exactly what I need.
Mhm.
And then when you take a step back and look at it, you're like, wow, unless I have like 18 hours a day to train, there's no way I can fit all of this in.
For sure. And I think it's also important to write down your goal. Like,
Mm.
what is your main goal, right? And then what are the steps that you need to follow to get there?
That's a
So
really good way to keep it simpler, is
mhm,
like put these blinders on, like, this is my
mhm,
goal. These are the
exactly.
things that will move me toward my goal.
Mhm,
Maybe right now I don't need to worry about all these things out on the periphery.
exactly. And then I think you should have, like, a main goal and maybe a sub category, maybe, like, another smaller goal, but really your focus should be that big picture, that bigger
Mhm.
goal. And then, what can you do to achieve it? And then maybe write down, like, 5 things, or keep it short, so because you don't want, like, 20 things that, again, you don't wanna go crazy. So just
Yeah.
keep it concise, keep it short, things that you'll know you'll actually stick to. So
Mhm. I think most people who sit down and do this, are probably going to, even if they think they're keeping it simple, they're
mhm,
probably going to end up more complicated than they need to be.
probably, yeah.
Um, so I think a good thing to do is, try to simplify.
Mhm,
It's going to be too complicated. Go into the gym, and those first handful of sessions, try to figure out where the pain points are. Like, did I
mhm,
make this thing that I don't actually have equipment for? Or it doesn't really fit because the training room is upstairs and the climbing is downstairs. And I tried to combine all these things so I can get this hormonal response. And now I'm running up and
mhm,
downstairs in between climbs, and that's making me tired.
yep,
And so find what these pain points are, and then sit down again and try to reduce those pain points. Simplify it even further once you've tried the session. That's
mhm.
another benefit of a coach, I think, is we understand a lot of these pain points because we've seen them over and over and over, and we can create sessions that flow a little more smoothly.
Oh, totally. And, I get people even in the people that I coach in the proven plans, they're like, "Well, can I add this? And can I add this?" And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Well, I mean, you can, but are you doing all the other things that are actually in the plan? Because if you're not, then
right.
why are you trying to add all these extra things in?"
Yeah. I'm
So
glad you said that. That's so damn common
mhm,
for people to just be like, "Well, what about this? And what about
right.
this? And I need to add this. And,
Mhm,
I want to do my first V3. So why am I not campusing 3 days a week?"
exactly.
Like, things like that. That's like, that's not what you need right now. That's why you
Mhm,
hired us. We have a much better idea of what you need. So
yep,
let's stick to what we've got.
totally.
All right, number 4, and you alluded to this a little bit. Life inevitably is going to get in the way of your super complicated program.
Mhm.
Things are going to come up. It's just a fact of life.
Mhm. Yeah, so, you know, we all have very busy lives. Everyone does. Like when somebody says, "Well, I'm too busy." I'm like, "Well, yeah, we're all busy." Like
Yeah, me
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Welcome.
totally. Yeah. But I think and I think that's where again with the coach, it's really nice that they can help you figure out, well, what should you focus on during the session?
Mhm.
Let's say you only have 45 minutes to an hour, where normally maybe the session would take a couple hours. So in this case, maybe you need to cut down some of the drills, like warm up, do maybe half of the drills that are in your program, then go to your hangs and then do your lemon bouldering.
Mhm.
So it's important to understand what you can cut out and still have a productive session. And I think that's where the coaching option is super helpful.
One of the things we've done in building the proven plans is, I want to make sure that we hit the things that we need when I'm building the sessions. But then I
Mhm.
also try to make sure there's time for the fun things that I know most climbers really want to do when they're in the gym. These plans are going to be much easier to follow if they're also fun to do.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of times where folks don't have the time to fit the whole session in, especially when it's like an endurance session for, say, climb 512 or something, where it's going to be a higher volume. It's going to take more time. You're climbing on sport climbs in the gym, so there's lots of logistics to work out, and these sessions can end up pretty long.
Mhm.
So people will jump in the group chat and say, or talk to their coach and say, I don't have time to fit this whole
Right.
session in. So what's the main focus? And you're
Exactly.
right. That's where simplicity really shines, because we can just say, well, here's the main part of it. Get
Mhm.
that done.
Yeah. And a lot of times people think, well, if I miss a session, it's over. My training is derailed.
Start it over.
Like I need to start over. But it's okay. It's okay to
Yeah.
miss a session here and there. Like you don't want to get in the habit of always missing sessions, but it's okay. Life is not coming to an end. Training is gonna go on. You're still gonna make gains. It's okay.
And I think when it's more complicated, it's harder to get back in the gym and do those
Mhm.
sessions again, right? Like
Yes, for
if you
sure.
missed a couple of sessions, you're like, "Oh god, I have to refine my starting weight for this and this and
Mhm.
this, and I need to see how my intervals are going, and
Mhm.
adjust those." And all of a sudden, there's all this work you have to do to get your complicated plan back on track.
Totally.
So again, this is a great reason for staying simple. Keep the thing simple.
Mhm.
It's going to be easier for you to cope with in your own brain, going back into the gym and starting again, continuing on with your plan the
Yeah,
way that it was, if it's not super complicated.
totally agree. Yeah.
All right. Before we move on, we're coming out of, not that we're ever actually going to come out of the COVID era,
Mhm.
but certainly there was a time where, um, every week you were seeing it a lot in the group chat, more gyms closing down and then gyms opening
Mhm.
back up for a week and then closing again. And,
Mhm.
you know, people's schedules going just crazy, and they couldn't keep up with it. They couldn't understand it. They just had to fit things in where they could. And I think that happens in our lives more often than we want to admit,
Mhm.
that other things pop up. Our schedule gets off. We can't keep things perfectly aligned on our calendars for months and months at a time. It's really hard to do.
Mhm.
Um, and one thing I definitely saw in that proven plan group chat was when people were asking for advice, when people were asking for us to help shift things around for them. it became so much easier for them to, have this mental health help that is climbing in a lot of cases. Going to
Mhm.
the gym and just getting your training done can be really valuable for your self-care.
For sure.
They were finding that these simpler proven plans were easier to stick to if they had it laid out for them,
Mhm.
and it's just you plug this session in and you go to the gym and you don't have to think about it. And I think that
Mhm.
was really valuable for a lot of people during
Mhm.
especially those first couple of waves of COVID.
No, for sure, and I think just not even during COVID, but in general, a lot of people go into the gym and they just don't know what to do. They don't know where
Mhm.
to start. They a lot of times will just climb with their friends, maybe do like add on, I don't know. Like they don't know what to do, and then never make gains because they just don't ever really know how to structure a gym session. So I think the proven
Mhm.
plans are super helpful in giving people a structure, something to follow, something that's consistent, and then in the end they're not only working on movement, technique, they're gaining strength, they're gaining confidence. So there's
Yeah,
just
so
there's just a
important.
lot of gains from having something structured, something to follow when you go into the gym versus just aimlessly climbing.
When life gets in the way, your brain power and your emotional
Mhm.
power are taken up with so many other things. You've got
Mhm.
work that's getting busy and stressful, you've got family life, you've got, all of these other things going on. So having a really complicated training plan in the midst of life taking over a lot of your cognitive processing powers,
Mhm.
um, it just feels like a grind when you go into the gym. So
Yeah.
why not have it really simple, have it easy to follow,
Mhm.
and don't make it a stressor as well.
Simple is fun too. Like, you know,
Yep.
it just when you go in, you do your drills, which I think are fun. I think a lot of our movement drills are actually just really fun. So,
Mhm.
and it's a great way to
Same.
start the session, set yourself up, for a successful time in the gym. So, totally agree. And like you said, after a lot of people climb in the evening right after work, after they've had this full day
Mhm.
where their brain is working and they're tired. They don't want to think about, well, what am I gonna do during the session? And it's nice to have something that's already laid out for you where you don't have to think about it and you just follow what the sessions that we have planned out, and they're fun. So
Yep. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to take what you just said about drills and use that to move us into our number three, which is we really only have so much adaptation potential anyway. Um, you can try to get better at all of the things at once, but it's going to feel really, really slow when you
mhm.
look at the gains that you're actually making. Um, Focusing on a thing or two at a time in an order that makes sense for preparing you for your climbing season or your performance time is so much better in terms of the gains that you actually have the ability to make.
Mhm.
And I think, where drills come in there is that the basics are so important. We want to be able to move well in order to translate this strength that we're gaining to the wall.
Mhm. I think also, like, one of our drills that we do is like the sloth and the monkey. Moving well and moving precise and in a way that's not wasting energy is super important when you're on your project outside, right? Like, if you can move well, move quick through some of the easier sections, right? Then you're wasting less energy,
Mhm.
and that will in turn help you when you get to the crux. So I think it's really important to master these things in the gym, and then when you're on a climb outside, you can quickly tap into these movements that you've done so much in the gym that they come more naturally.
Yep, absolutely. Also when you're focusing on those basics early in the session. So I'll kind of lay out how I think about sessions when I'm building a lot of these proven plans.
Mhm.
You'll come in, you'll do an off the wall warm up that's pretty quick, just gets you moving. Then there's some on the wall, very specific warm ups that are asking you to move in certain ways and asking you to start putting your attention to moving well and feeling
Mhm.
good while on the wall. And that just gets you primed and ready to try harder things, not only physically, but also mentally. And that sort of leads you into the rest of your session. That's in general how our proven plans are built. It's very, very simple.
Mhm.
We'll go through a few different drills that are laid out for you, that have videos there for you, that are really going to hammer home the basics that are m- arguably more important than your finger strength, arguably
Mhm.
more important than how much power you have, is, do you know how to change your pace when it's
Mhm.
a situation that demands
Exactly.
it?
Exactly. Mhm.
Things like that. And when you go in and you're just looking forward to the complicated parts, you're going to fall right into the normal pace that you climb, the normal style that you climb with. You're
Mhm.
not going to be exploring outside of that at
Right.
all.
Mhm.
So simple not only gives you a better chance at adapting, but it
Mhm.
also gives you more time to be able to spend on these things that aren't your normal go-to.
Yep. Totally. Totally agree.
All right, let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back with our top 2 reasons that simplicity in your training plans is better. Sport climbing season is coming fast. Got a nemesis route you need to clip chains on? For over a decade, we've helped climbers prepare for their goals. We've seen patterns emerge, showing what's most effective for each level of climber. Those patterns became our proven plans, a training system that you can follow from complete beginner to 514 and beyond. With workouts geared toward your goals and focused on improving not only strength and power, but tactics and mindset as well, each proven plan comes with a built-in group chat and an option to work directly with one of our coaches. We don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach to climbing. You shouldn't either. All right, we are back with our number 2 reason why simplicity is better in your training plans, is that the simple methods have been proven. And I don't say that just in terms of our proven plans, but for for a lot of years, people have been anecdotally looking at the things that we've been doing and seeing whether they work or not. There may not be tons of research specifically into climbing yet, but the simpler things that people have been doing for years have been proven or not, and they've been thrown out. So these new complicated things are a gamble in a lot of cases. They may or may not work. So, do you have the time to experiment on yourself and gamble with whether these things are going to work or not? Or would you rather stick with the simple things that you know work?
I think it's also important to, like, we've talked about experimenting with different things, like, but maybe keeping track, really keeping
Hmm.
track of what what is working for you also. Um, I think it's super important. A lot of my proven plan clients are like, "Well, like, I is the comment section for me or for you?" And I'm like,
Right.
"Well, it's really for you to keep track." Like, I read them, right? I go through it and I read the comments, there may be questions, but I think it's really important for, um, for you to write down, what is happening during your session, what is going well,
Right.
what's not going well, and then that will really help you understand what's working. And when when it's super complicated, like, it's hard to keep track. of all
Yeah.
these things that are going on with you, your body, your mind, your mindset too. So I think it's really important to keep things simple, keep track, understand what's working and what's not working, and then build on from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that in these like really complex studies in sports science, they have to use these really complicated statistical models to figure out what all the data means.
Mhm.
Um, we don't want to have to do that when we're training. I don't anyway.
Right. Who
Maybe
has the
maybe
time for
some
that?
folks out there,
Yeah.
maybe Dale loves that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that much computation
Mhm.
to figure out whether what I'm doing works or not. And and we have quite a few things that we know works. We may not know the mechanism by which it all works,
Mhm.
but we've seen it work over and over and over. And those are the things that I end up putting in the training plans more often than not.
Mhm.
And I often, even for myself, even though I love experimenting on myself, I very often skip the super complicated things that haven't been proven yet. I'm not getting any younger. I need to
Mhm.
get better while I can.
No, I agree. I think again with everything going on in all of our lives, it's super stressful to have something complicated, especially in your training to keep track of.
If we want this thing to be a fun, feel good thing. And don't get me wrong, training shouldn't maybe always be fun. There are
Yep.
going to be hard
Right.
parts, there are going to be struggles, there should be.
Mhm.
But the overall feeling of it should be that it's moving you forward, that it's enjoyable enough for you to do
Mhm.
it again, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and the more complicated and the harder to tell whether it's working, the less fun it's going to be, the less likely you are
Mhm.
to repeat it.
Right.
And we know that repeating a thing over and over and over,
Mhm.
being really consistent with it, and gradually increasing the intensity or the volume or something is what makes us better. So
Totally. And yeah,
these
you don't
complicated things we're not going to do,
yeah.
not going to help.
And it shouldn't feel like a chore, right? When things get
Right.
complicated, it feels like a chore and you're like, "Oh, I really don't wanna do this. Like, why am I doing this?" And like you said, then it takes the fun out of it. And then a lot of times that's when you're like, "Well, why am I doing this?" And that's when you drop it and
hmm
you're like, "Well, I'm done training. This is too much." So, why not keep it simple, keep it fun?
Yeah, like you said in the very beginning, you can add things over time,
Exactly.
especially if this is the first time you're training, if you're writing your own training plan and you're making it way overcomplicated and you're worried about, what type of periodization you're using and, there are all these things to take into account. And we're
Mhm.
as guilty as anybody else at putting tons of information, just throwing information at you that you have
Mhm.
to figure out on your own, and it can get really overwhelming. Um, Keep it simple at first, and if you can stick with that over
Exactly.
time, you can start experimenting a little bit. You can start adding
Mhm.
in some more complicated things to see if they work for you.
Mhm.
Um, Not to mention, if you add in too many complicated things at once, you have no idea what's actually working or not.
Mhm.
You
Exactly.
don't know what the outcomes of these things are
Mhm.
going to be. So let's say you write, the world's most complicated training plan and you see amazing gains. You're going to have
Yeah.
to do all that complicated shit again because you
Right.
have no idea what part of it
What
worked.
actually worked. Yeah. No, totally. Exactly.
All right. That brings us to our number one reason. And really, this whole podcast is just a reason for me to say this. Training really isn't the hard part of all this. You want to keep it simple because your biggest gains for most people are going to be in the mindset, in the learning to move better, in the building up your movement library, in having a coach or a partner to talk you into getting on the thing that you don't believe
Mhm.
you can do. That stuff is so much more important than whether your finger strength numbers went up this year or not.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the main things I see after people finish, their proven plan is their confidence. They're
Yeah.
a lot more confident in themselves, in their movement, in their climbing. And I think they really believe they're stronger. And I think that's great to have the confidence to be like, hey, yeah, I can get on that thing that I've been thinking about for years. Like I am ready to get on that climb because
Mhm.
yeah, I have the confidence in myself. Again, that's all going back to having a better mindset.
Yeah, and that's something, when I was very first writing these plans, which have gone through a couple of iterations at this point,
Mhm.
you know, one of the reasons I wanted it to be pretty simple is so that people can finish it without getting overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And getting through a training plan, committing to, 12 weeks of grinding in the gym and going in and working on things and having an intention when you walk into the gym and checking all these boxes is hard work.
Mhm.
And getting through that should make you more confident. Um, if you can get through those 12 weeks, then a climbing season should be relatively easy to figure out the logistics for and get out and actually try the projects and do the things you said you were going to do, or at least try the things you said you were going
Mhm.
to do.
Mhm.
Um, those are the places where I see people fail so often is they get wrapped up in the really complicated shit they're doing in the gym and they forget to go outside and actually try the thing they were going to try.
Mhm. No, for sure. And that's what I try to tell, when my clients, when they finish the program, they're like, well, now what? I'm like, no, now you have to go outside and you have to see what like you got to get on those things that you've been thinking about and see where you're at. It's a good way to test, how well the program worked for you. And yeah, I think that a lot of people forget, like, they should go outside if they can, obviously, right? Like, everyone has different seasons, you're different parts of the world. Um, you can't always get outside, but if you can get outside, go in the gym and have performance days in the gym.
Mhm.
Like, that's also totally okay.
Yeah, I think that these plans, I mean, especially the proven plans, and I think any simple plan should be set up in such a way that it is, building your confidence to a high point, building your efficiency to a high point, building your preparedness to work on a project, teaching you
Mhm.
tactics, um, things like that are so important and get lost in these really complicated protocols and methodologies that can, to be totally frank here, they can be really valuable, but they're most often valuable for the more elite climber who's already
Mhm.
mastered a lot of these things we've been talking about, like movement efficiency and pacing and you know understanding how to structure their day at the crag and
Mhm.
their season, of climbing, and people who already have their logistics figured out for the
Mhm.
whole season, and people's who can switch their mindset to a place where it needs to be. The elite climbers have that stuff at least largely mastered. They're going
Mhm.
to struggle with bits of that too. But that's why these really complicated protocols work for them is
Mhm.
because they have all those things mastered. They can take their training and translate it to the wall really quickly and easily.
Mhm.
Whereas newer climbers, below the like V9, V10, V14 or 514 and maybe even higher than that. But below that level, there's still a lot of these soft skills that need to be learned. So putting all of your energy toward complicated training maybe isn't the best way to see gains. It's certainly not the best way to translate your training to your climbing.
Mhm. And I think also that's where with the proven plans with coach communication, that's where you can take advantage of
Mhm.
of your coach and ask them to help you with tactics when you are ready to go outside. How do you approach your climbing days outside? A lot of the questions I get is, let's say you're going on a week-long trip. Like, what do you do? What do you do on your first day? What do you do on the second day? Do you take a rest day? I'm like, yes, definitely take a rest day. But, a lot of times people don't know kind of where to start, what to
Right.
work on. And yeah, so I think having somebody that has been through it is a great tool to help you plan out that week-long, 2-week-long trip, right? So that's
Yeah, for sure. I can't say enough about how I think coaching is really important. More important than training, and I think that's we've conflated those two terms a lot ourselves, and I think they get conflated on the internet a lot. But
Mhm,
training and coaching, trainers and coaches are different things.
mhm,
Um, the same person can be both, absolutely, but they are fundamentally two different things. And
mhm,
coaching, I think, is much more difficult than training. Writing a training plan is actually fairly easy.
mhm,
Um, a little sort of hidden secret in here that I'm sure you recognize, that some people who've gone through the proven plans recognize, and you just mentioned it, that they feel more confident and they get all these sort of side effects from the training.
mhm,
Is that the proven plans look fairly simple. It's like, oh, you're climbing this way, you're climbing this way. He's asking
mhm,
me to climb like this now, and now we're doing this. It
mhm,
seems really simple as you go through the sessions, but the actual creation of them does have some complication built in that while making these, I'm trying to force you into situations that you're going to encounter when you go outside.
mhm,
There's going to be times when the wall is busy and you need to line up for your climb. This section of the gym is busy, but you need to get your 4x4s in or whatever
right.
it is. I want those situations to occur. So I've tried to build a lot of
Mhm,
those situational elements into these proven plans so that we can learn these parts, the soft skills, as opposed to just hanging more weight, on a hangboard.
mhm,
All of these things go into making you a better climber when you get out to the crag. And for me, that's the complicated part, is building all of that into a plan that actually is really simple to follow.
mhm. See, you're tricky. You're tricking us.
I'm I'm breaking
I'm
my own
just kidding.
rules of
I
keeping
know.
it simple,
I know.
but I'm doing it invisibly.
Mhm. Tricky,
You didn't
tricky.
hear anything you just heard.
No, I mean, like you said, really, like building a training plan isn't super complicated.
It doesn't need to be.
It doesn't need to be, right? Especially when you have a goal in mind.
Yeah.
Like I can't stress that enough. Like I think it's important to have a goal, because if you don't have a goal, then what are you training for? Like what is the finish line, right? So
I'm just training to be able to put cooler videos up on
yeah.
Instagram. That's really all I'm doing these days. All right. I think we've said about all we can say about keeping it simple. Like you said before we even started this episode, we should be keeping this simple too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, I honestly think if you're, I think it's really valuable to try and write your own training plans.
Mhm.
I'm not advocating that everyone should just jump into a proven plan. Um, I really do think writing your own training plan can be really valuable. Just try not to get too sucked into all of the bright, shiny new methods that you've seen on Instagram or that you've seen your favorite pro climber say they use, when in
Mhm.
reality, they only did it that one time in the gym and never did it again. And just don't get sucked into that. Keep it simple, and you're going to get
Mhm.
better results.
Totally. And like Kris said earlier, an experiment, right? Like you'll have to probably do a couple drafts of the plan. Don't just settle for the first draft because it might not work right. Like you will have to tweak some things. So make sure that you go in the gym, go through it maybe once or even twice before you really settle on something, and make sure it's going to work for your own schedule. So
yeah, totally. If you want to work with Nadya, if you're interested, you can do that through our website. We don't really have an option to choose a coach when you're buying Proven Plans with coaching, but a lot of those do end up going to you or Dale or Taylor as well. Some folks get those, but we also have custom openings with Nadya available now and then, so get on the wait list. You can find links for that in the show notes, and you'll get an email, and it's a first come, first serve, be quick on the draw. Another reason to have a simple training plan, because if it's complicated and you're stuck in the gym, you're going to miss our emails. And you know where you can find us online. We're at powercompanyclimbing.com on the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Pinterest, the YouTubes. We're not on the TikToks. Some people have tried to get me on the TikTok. It's not going to happen. I guarantee it. You are
we
also...
want to see your moves. I know you got some moves.
My daughter would be horrified if I got on TikTok. I'm pretty sure.
That would be pretty hilarious.
She would disown me.
Fair.
We're at Power Company Climbing, all the places where you can find us. You will not find us on the TikToks or the Twitters because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
We don't know.
This time, 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 power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. 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 This time to build. 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 This time. This time to build, this time to build, this time. 'Cause Jah is the sinister character.